aware that time is passing, and we did promise everybody that we're going to get into the meat. We keep calling it the meat. What can we call it? The fromage of this episode. The creamy layers of calcium goodness. That is going to be our tips for new players or players of role-playing systems. I guess we just have a general chat about what you'd like to see. What would you like to see? Somebody you've not played with them before, but you'd expect them to be kind of experienced, and they come to your table. What would you expect them to come with?
I tell you what, I'll throw one out that's a real easy one. I would say no. Think about what you are going to do in your turn. In a role-playing game that is turn-based, like D&D or Pathfinder, when it's not your turn, be thinking about what you want to do. So when it comes around to you, you're not suddenly like, oh, just get the spell book open. You've had, if it's a big group, you've had sort of 10, 15 minutes while it's been going around everyone else to kind of think about that. So just take that time and be like, okay, yeah, I know I'm going to try and use color spray.
Yes, just to clarify, of course, Dan is talking about combat. When you slip into that turn-based system. And I absolutely agree. It reminds me, it's the same sort of thing of when you stand behind someone at the coffee shop and there's a big long queue, and you stand, you wait, and then the person in front of you gets to the counter and goes, and you're like, how have you not been deciding what cup of coffee you want to have? We've literally stood in the queue for like 10 minutes. Like, why not?
Here's another one that's very a more general one, again, for spellcasters. Know your spells.
Yeah.
There's a fine line, I think, because on the one hand, these games are complicated sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with not understanding every facet of your character. We lead busy lives, and nobody is going to be angry at you for not completely understanding what is quite a complicated and slightly silly game. No one's going to be mad that you don't know the precise rules for Summon Monster 4 all the time if you never use that spell. However, just bear in mind that although your GM will support you a lot of the time, a good GM will support you and help you to understand your character. Every time that you throw something back to the GM and say, I don't understand this, tell me how this works for this thing that I do, you are effectively asking your GM to do work for you. And that's fine to an extent, but just be aware that you're doing it. And if you're doing it a lot, be aware that you're putting a lot of work onto your GM that they don't necessarily need to be doing. If you cast a spell and your GM's like, tell me how that works, and you go, I don't know, then the GM's got to stop. They've got to open the rule book. They've got to pause the game for everyone else, and they've got to work out this stuff for you. It's fine to be like, well, I've got this new spell. I've never used it before. I don't quite get how it works. This is what I've read. Can you explain it to me? That's fine. That sort of thing's fine. But if it's happening every time, then maybe you're not playing the best cast. Maybe you need to.
I found it useful as a spellcaster to have a default option. Find a spell that you could, like a cantrip that just does a bit of damage or does something, and have it as a default option. So if it comes around to you quickly and you haven't thought about what spells you want to do and you're really not sure what to do, just do your default. The Freveld, of course, it's had a bit of oh god, I've cast it so long. Freezing Ray, I think it was, whatever it was. Ray of Frost. There we go. But I used that as a default setting when I wasn't sure what to do, and you just go poo. There you go. Do your pew pew. The turns go round again. It gives you another chance to have a look at your spells and think about what you're going to do.
I think an attack rotation is a really useful thing to have with in any kind of. I'm increasingly calling them squad-based tactical RPGs, D&D and Pathfinder, which is effectively what these sort of combat simulators are. Having an attack rotation is quite useful to just be like, I know that in a normal fight, if I'm playing optimally, in round 1 I do this, in round 2 I do this, in round 3 I do this. Yeah. The caveat with that is, once you've got that in place, then change it up, even if it's not necessarily the best thing to do, because you will go insane if you do that. Yeah. It's why I only ever play casters really in games, because I'm kind of like, I need a dozen options going into this fight, because if I lock down if I lock down the best thing we could do, I played a warlock in 5e, and very quickly I was just like, I cast Ring of Fire twice, and then I cast whatever their spell, someone will say it in the chat, their cantrip that they do all the time. I just chain cast that while walking backwards, and that is every single fight that we do. That is all I do in it, and I went insane within a few games of just doing that. So go through your spell book and just be like, nah, I'm going to try something else this round. I'm going to try. I know I've got this thing that works, but I'm going to come up with something else. And that thing that I know works is going to be my backup for when a combat gets sprung on us, or I panic and I haven't thought of anything, and that's when I go back to the thing that helped. Eldritch Blast. Thank you, Alex.
Eldritch Blast. Yeah, I was going to say, because it's gosh, I think it's just, as a player, it's just have a courtesy to acknowledge how much work your DM or GM has put into it. I know we joke about, you rock up with a frog written on a napkin or something like that, but generally you've read a lot of the books, you've bought a lot of the bits and bobs, you've invested in this, and you've come to the pub, or you've logged on to do that. Don't be sat on your phone or just sort of being distracted, or just sort of, just be aware that other people have a turn, and kind of just enjoy other people having a turn. It's fine. You're part of a group. It's not a sort of solo adventure. Because it is, I know that, I'm sure you find the same thing, Dan. It can be, it's just rather off-putting when you put all this work in, you're describing a narrative, and someone's just sat on their phone. I know it bothers me as a player.
That can be an issue if it's happening all the time. And there are ways that you can work around it. I've had players like that in the past as a GM, and you talk to them and you're like, okay, why are we doing this? Is that, and often it's a case of, well, I need to, I find it hard to follow when it's other people's goes or things like that. A lot of the time I find when people are on the phone, it's because I've strayed into a single character narrative as a GM. And so I'm focusing on one person, and that person's feeling left out, and that's why they're not necessarily engaged. But I've also laid down the law sometimes as a GM where I've been like, like when we roll initiative, your initiative, you go in the order, and on the number that your initiative is, at the point you realize we were rolling initiative, and you tell me your number. Like if you weren't paying attention, you didn't notice we'd rolled initiative, you go in at the end of the order, because you've got to be in the game for that.
All of these we acknowledge we all do, but this is more about, I think, being aware of it helps bring those numbers down of how often you do it.
Okay, here's a nice one, and I will come back actually to the point that we're making when we round up, because I think that's quite important. But here's a general useful one, I think, and that is, be honest. Be honest if there's something about your character that you don't understand, or that you are not interested in. A good GM will help you to learn your character. They will help, and they will spot if there are elements of your character that you're not using, and they will try and engage with you on that. But don't just pick something, because especially like build guides are really bad for this. Build guides will be like, you have to take these abilities, take this one, take this one, and you end up with a bunch of abilities that you're like, well, the build said I had to have it, and I don't really know what it is. I was helping my wife to level up her Starfinder character yesterday, and we've just got to level 9. Actually, level 9 Solarian. Lots of really fun stuff comes out. You get your Zenith revelations, and there's some really great stuff. And she was like, I really want the one that lets you summon shadow creatures and just pull shadow creatures out of a gravity void and make them fight for you. And I was like, that sounds really exciting. And we had a look through it. And I went a bit cross-eyed, because the summoning rules in Starfinder, oh my goodness. I'm sure they're really simple when you've used them a couple of times, but I was struggling. And Fee was like, you know what? If you're not sure about it, I'm definitely not going to be sure about it. Let's pick something simpler. And we looked through it, and she was like, that one, I understand what that one means. That is the revelation I'm going to take. Let's not worry about the summoning one, even though that's the one I kind of want to do. It's going to be a hassle, so let's just skip it. And that's a really nice. That's great for a GM, because it's like, oh, good, because I would have spent half a day learning the summoning rules if that's what you wanted to have.
Yes.
But for me as a GM, for you to say you don't have to do that work, that's great, because that means I can just spend some time learning something else. I can spend some time writing the game.
There's also something come up in the chat from Candice about my tip: don't pick an accent or a voice that you can't maintain. Now, yes, of course, I think we did, the other players of the group did advise, but, it's still good. You've got to sort of learn these things. My addition to that would be that no one, unless they're a total douche, is going to mind if you recast. So it's fine to drop that difficult accent, and all of a sudden your character does not speak with this bizarre high-pitched piping voice. They actually just talk a little bit more like how you would feel comfortable talking. TV shows recast, everything recasts. All of a sudden somebody different is playing her brother. It doesn't matter. You should be able to do that. Don't feel as a player that you need to keep maintaining something. If you're not having fun, stop doing it.
I disagree completely with Candice's piece of advice. I think change your accent as much as you want to change your accent. And if your accent is bad, let your accent be bad. Do a voice that you are happy doing as your character. As long as it is not offensive to anyone around the table, then have fun with it. Play around, find something that works, change it up as much as you want. Change your accent halfway through a campaign. I've done that before. We've done it on the show before. It's fine. You can change stuff up. Don't try and be the Danger Club. Don't try and be anything. Everyone talks about the Matt Mercer effect with GMing, and I'm certainly not equating us to Matt Mercer in that regard, but there is this sense, especially when you're just the nature of what we're doing, we're saying how to be a better player. You're already a good player. You're at the table. You're with people. You're having fun. That's all you need. You don't need to know all of the rules. You don't need to be able to do accents. You don't need to be the greatest role player. You don't need to be the greatest tactical player. You need to come to the table with, as I say, a spirit of kindness and a willingness to sit with people and have fun. And you know what? If you came to the table today and you did a load of great role play, but your build wasn't great, you played the game right. If you turned up and you just hit someone with the sword a couple of times and you didn't do you talked entirely in the third person, you did no role play at all, you did the game right. If you sat at the table and you barely said anything because, you're having that kind of a week and you're not feeling very people-y, but you wanted to be there with your friends and you shared that moment with them and you were there, and you were playing the game right. It is not about writing a great epic story. You're not trying to make Lord of the Rings. You're trying to sit around a table with a group of human beings and have a social interaction. And if you are successful in that, then no matter what you did at the table, you were successful in having a game.
I would say that as a player, it's fine to play a character that is quite surly and a person of very few words. That's fine. But just make sure that you do communicate out of character a little bit more, because sometimes you can find that some players are like, I'm playing a surly character of few words, and then take it into the outside of the character as well. And it's like, you are there to socialize, you are there to sit around the table. I appreciate that not everyone is as absolutely sort of verbose as myself, or others, but still do try and interact and communicate, because that's essentially why you're sort of there, even if your character doesn't much in the game, because I can find that can be quite difficult role-playing with people who don't speak or reveal anything about themselves. You're like, I'm going to end up ignoring you a bit, but I'm so sorry, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what to interact. You're just sort of sitting at the back, smouldering, smoking your pipe, saying nothing.
On the opposite side of that coin, if you are a particularly verbose player, if you are a very confident player, be aware of giving other people space.
Yes.
Your GM will play a part in that as well, of kind of just making sure that everyone is involved. But essentially, if the game is starting to be about one person, other than like specific moments where you're doing specific character moments, but if a game is consistently being driven by one person, then it's become a lopsided game. And so I think a player has as much of a role to play in a group of keeping everybody involved as the GM does. It's not just the GM's job to make sure that everyone gets to speak. If you find that you're shouting all the time, I've been at gaming tables like that, where it's just everyone shouting, everyone trying to do their bit, and it's just like, okay, thanks, I'm out, this is not for me.
Does link us nicely into what was mentioned earlier by Gwot and others, and generally is something to keep in your mind, is that you are part of a group, and that includes the DM or the GM. They are not exclusive. They are not there to murder you. They are not there to have a horrible time or to make sure that you really, really hate your evening. You're there together, so play together, communicate, have fun together, and do everything. Try and keep everyone in mind, and that everyone around the table should get a good a time as everyone else. You're all there. It's not I like to come here and I like to play my character and then I go home. It's like I like all of us playing our characters, and having a damn good time. Because as we often say, if you're not having a good time, why would you bother? You've got to have a good time. So make sure that everyone around the table has a good time.
You know what? I'd go as far to say that if you go to your game night at the pub and you end up barely playing a game, you have a beer and you have a good time, that's still a valid evening. You know what? Yeah. If you're spending time with each other, then that's what matters. That's more important than anything else.
Well, suffice to say, not only does this make me want to go to the pub, but I want to go to the pub with you, Dan. Unfortunately, we can't do that just yet, so we're going to have to say goodbye until we can. So it's goodbye from Dan.
Cheers, everybody. I've just been uploading new episodes, and I can tell you the ones that are coming up have got the slithering logo on them. We are going to be in Kibwe so soon. Get caught up. It's getting really, really exciting.
Oh, yes, indeedy. Yes, indeed.
Take care of one another.
And it's goodbye from me, James Foxy Lockhart, hoping that you all have a very dangerous and, of course, stay Wednesdays.
Before the others catch up to you, Bubba, you just see a big spider web on one of the bushes.
Okay.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
We better watch out for Webby Johnsons.
There's going to be, Weber Douglases all over the place.
Yes.
What's Webby Douglases?
Mandible Mandies.
What are they?
Oh, they're just friendly forest
Because
folk.
webs are... Because you just said webs, and webs come from spiders.
Nah.
There's a spider.
I can make webs happen.
There's a spider. There's a spider right there.
Oh,
No,
Dalton, it's not a
How does
spider.
he fail to
Don't
know
worry.
most things,
Wait,
but he can understand that a web comes from a spider? How has he got knowledge?
Are you sure? I'm not coming any closer if there's a spider there.
No, there's not.
It's okay.
Don't point it out to me.
I made the verb. I did the verb. It was me, okay?
I'm gonna roll to see if you're lying to me. A natural 20. You're lying to me. You're lying.
How do you...
All right.